approximately 30 to 40 feet in from the tips of the building, we cast in some steel plates, which later received a vertical steel rod that ran down to the foundation wall. And there were four of these. Two of them came to a termination just at the balcony eyebrow in that area. And these steel rods had a diameter of, if I remember correctly, approximately 1.5 inches, and just shortly above the juncture at the wall, at the foundation wall and at the balcony, we had these large hydraulic cylinders that were attached to these rods, so that during windy conditions, since the exterior walls of the structure were designed to permit the shell to move during wind, there was actually vertical movement in these cylinders. On one end of the theater, depending on the wind conditions, the hydraulic cylinders would stretch out to permit the shell to go up a little bit, but not too much. And then on the other end, they would be compressed so as to keep that vertical movement to a minimum. And I kind of recall after the theater opened, for the first couple of months during times of high winds, at about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening, my phone would ring, and occasionally I'd go over there to satisfy the projectionist that the noises he heard from within the wall, where the hydraulic cylinders were in fact things that we had anticipated, and he could feel comfortable that he heard those noises. And then after a couple of months, he was satisfied, and this call ceased.
It then became the job of the general contractor to actually construct the theater. Some of the main tasks were to build a forest of supports to hold up the roof slab forms, to install the plywood forms with double curvatures, to actually pour or place concrete up both sides at once. To do this required 4 tall lifting cranes. Then let the concrete rest undisturbed for 28 days. Let's hear what all this involved.
Okay, this is a photograph of the completed structure before the enclosing walls are put up. Now, the enclosing walls keep the cold air out, keep the wind and rain out and the birds out of the building, but they're not structural. The walls are not structural. In this building, this is the structure, this great bird-like form. And that set a world's record, as this is again called the hyperbolic paraboloid. It was the world's largest concrete roof of this type. The next picture shows the enclosing walls in place. So you can see the triangular kind of roof here, and the enclosing walls, which are not holding up the roof, just a matter of keeping the weather out, and stray dogs and cats and birds. This shows the completed building.
We had never built a building such as Eden's Theater before, so we didn't know really what were proper plans and specifications. And my job really was an interpretive job, and my function was to see that the proper people were at the construction site at the proper time, so that things would harmonize and go along as they were supposed to, because building repair due to construction failures is extremely important, is extremely expensive, and cannot be tolerated in the normal course of events. And there are several examples of building failures in Chicago, which I won't go into, but Chicago abounds with building failures. Our object was to avoid any type of failure, if possible. So therefore, the firm lived up to its reputation of listening to the contractor and talking to the contractor. The contractor always had someone to talk to ask a question, and hopefully get an answer. And that was my role. The drawings weren't perfect, But the thing I learned at that stage in my career, no set of drawings are perfect. And this was an extremely complicated structure. You had one chance to do it correctly. And to economize on the expression of information would have been just a disaster.
I made a decision that prior to the framing of the hyperbolic paraboloid itself, that we'd undertake the casting of the balcony, and we would therefore not have to involve ourselves in the placement of concrete under this huge roof at some future date. It also meant that the supports for the roof shell would ultimately have to be supported on that balcony, which was checked into and found to be substantial and able to carry those loads, since those loads were relatively light. The framing of the balcony was a very laborious undertaking. The framing of the balcony was at least as difficult, if not more challenging, than the framing of the shell, because there were so many finite details associated with the angular framing that was to be undertaken. I was delighted when that particular structure was completed. From there we went on, of course, to the only remaining, the biggest challenge was the shell itself, and it was the requirement of the project specifications that that portion of the hyperbolic paraboloid, including the abutments, the two supports, were to be cast monolithically, meaning that you could not say, today I'll pour a couple hundred yards of concrete, or place a couple hundred yards of concrete and come back a week later and place some more. Everything had to be fluid, plastic, and placed and finished on within a given continuing period of time, which meant a tremendous amount of framing material, plywood, centering. Centering is the steel tubular scaffolds you may have seen in some slides here. That material was of a magnitude that we started to receive shipments directly from the manufacturer of the scaffolding in Pennsylvania. I'd get on the phone and just say, send me a freight car load of scaffold frames, and what size do you want? I'd say, it does not matter. It's just get them out here. The requirement that Paul referred to, where he had to pour this as a continuous structure, is contained in one small note on the drawings. And if somebody didn't see that note, maybe the world would be different now, but the note says, it is required that the abutment, shell, and edge members be poured continuously in one pour, starting at elevation and so forth and so on. And it concludes, at no time shall the edge of the pour be allowed to set before adjacent concrete is placed. That is one small note on the structural drawings which affected everything that was done on this particular project. I had a flashback. Since the roof had, I think, 550 yards of concrete. I think so, yes. Yes. Yeah, Mr. Hillstead scheduled the massive roof pour with the edge members to start at midnight. And they had it looked like a movie set. They had big Klieg lights, and they had people directing trucks, and they had people saying, up there, that's where the concrete goes. And they worked, they finished about 8 o'clock in the evening the following day, so that they put in 20 hours.